It started with a scratching at the door. When he opened his cabin door, he found a little German Shepherd puppy freezing in the cold. He let the freezing puppy into his cabin, thinking he was just saving it from the cold, but what it did next was totally shocking. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Jack had lived alone in the mountains for nearly 5 years. A retired carpenter with rough hands and a weathered face, he had built his small wooden cabin with his own 2 hands after losing his wife to cancer. Since then, solitude had become his only companion. Just as Jack was settling into his old rocking chair with a cup of black coffee in hand, he heard it, barely a sound at first. A faint scratch at the door. He paused, listening. Then, it came again, this time followed by a soft, pitiful whimper. Jack frowned and set his mug down. No one ever came by unannounced, especially not in a snowstorm. He grabbed his coat, stepped over to the door, and slowly opened it. There, shivering in the doorway, stood a tiny German Shepherd puppy. Its fur was dusted with snow, ears drooping, body trembling. Jack blinked in disbelief. Where had it come from? There were no houses for miles. No footprints. Nothing but trees and falling snow behind it. The pup looked up at him with wide, pleading eyes and whimpered again. Jack hesitated. He wasn't a dog person. He barely spoke to people, let alone animals. But something about the way the little creature stood there, silent but desperate, tugged at him. With a sigh, he opened the door wider and stepped aside. "All right," he muttered. "Come in before you freeze." The puppy didn't hesitate. It limped inside, leaving behind tiny wet paw prints and a trail of mystery. Jack laid an old blanket near the fireplace, and the puppy curled into it without hesitation, still shivering but no longer whining. He fetched a bowl of warm water and some leftover chicken, placing it beside the dog. The little one devoured it hungrily, barely pausing to breathe. Jack watched quietly from his chair, something stirring in him he hadn't felt in years. By morning, the snow outside was thicker, but inside, warmth filled the cabin, not just from the fire, but from the small presence now sleeping peacefully at Jack's feet. He chuckled softly and muttered, "You've got a Shadow, following me around already. That's what I'll call you, Shadow." Shadow began sticking to Jack like glue, tail wagging every time Jack moved, eyes locked on him with a strange intensity. But there was something else, something odd. The puppy would often stop and stare toward the back window, ears perked, body stiff. At first, Jack thought nothing of it. Maybe Shadow heard animals in the woods. But it kept happening. The same direction. The same frozen stare. He brushed it off. After all, the pup had been through something. Still, a feeling crept in. Maybe Shadow hadn't just wandered here. Maybe he had a reason. It started the 3rd night. Jack was stirring a pot of stew when he heard it, soft scratching at the back door. At first, he assumed it was the wind or maybe a branch brushing against the cabin. But when he turned around, there was Shadow, pawing at the back door, ears perked, tail stiff. "What is it, boy?" Jack asked. Shadow looked back at him, then returned to scratching, more insistent now. Jack opened the door, letting the cold rush in. The puppy bolted outside, stopped at the edge of the porch, and barked into the woods. A low, urgent bark. Not playful, focused, like he was trying to say something. "Shadow, come back inside," Jack called, but the pup didn't budge. The next day, it happened again. This time, Shadow refused to eat until Jack opened the door. Once outside, he'd walk to the same spot at the tree line, look back at Jack, and bark again. By the 4th day, Jack couldn't shake the feeling. It wasn't random. The pup wasn't lost. He was leading. Finally, Jack zipped up his coat, grabbed a flashlight, and muttered, "All right, let's see what you're trying to tell me." He followed Shadow into the snow-covered woods, unaware of what was waiting. The cold bit through Jack's jacket. As he trudged after Shadow, the snow crunching beneath his boots. The pup moved with purpose, weaving through the trees like he knew exactly where he was going. Jack followed, his breath forming clouds in the air, flashlight beam dancing across snow-laden branches. They walked for nearly 15 minutes before Shadow suddenly stopped. His ears stood up. He sniffed the air and then bolted toward a mound of snow beneath a pine tree, barking frantically. Jack hurried over, puzzled, until he saw it. Something Metallic glinted under the snow. A car. It was nearly buried, like it had skidded off the road and rolled down the embankment. Jack's heart began to pound. He dropped to his knees and cleared the snow from the windshield. Inside, slumped over the steering wheel, was a woman, unconscious. In the back seat, barely visible through the fog glass, was a small child, bundled in a blanket. Jack didn't hesitate. He yanked open the door. Cold air rushed out, followed by the terrifying stillness of near death. The woman was breathing, shallow and weak. The child stirred slightly, but didn't cry. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands and dialed emergency services. "We need help now," he barked. "There's been an accident. A woman and child, they're alive, but barely." As he looked down at Shadow, who was sitting silently beside the wreck, Jack realized the truth. This little puppy hadn't been lost. He had been leading Jack straight to them, to save them. The wail of sirens broke the forest silence within minutes. Red and blue lights painted the trees as paramedics rushed down the snowy path Jack had marked with branches. They moved quickly, carefully lifting the woman and child from the frozen wreck. Oxygen masks, thermal blankets, soft voices of reassurance. Jack watched it all unfold like a dream. The paramedic turned to him. "You found them just in time. Another hour out here, and they wouldn't have made it." Jack glanced down at Shadow, who sat calmly beside him, tail wagging once, like he already knew. Back at the cabin, Jack made a pot of coffee and fed Shadow the last of the stew. The little dog licked the bowl clean and curled up near the fire like nothing had happened. But Jack couldn't stop thinking about it. How the dog had come straight to his door. How he had led him through the woods like a compass. The local news picked up the story within a day. Headlines read, "Mystery puppy leads man to crashed. Car saves lives." But to Jack, Shadow wasn't a headline. He was a miracle with 4 paws. In the days that followed, Jack received more visitors than he had in years. Reporters, neighbors, even the sheriff. Everyone wanted to see the little hero that had saved 2 lives. Shadow didn't seem to mind the attention, wagging his tail politely, though he never strayed far from Jack's side. Animal control came to scan for a microchip. Nothing. No collar, no missing pet reports, no signs of ownership. Posters were put up just in case someone claimed him. No one ever did. It was as if Shadow had appeared out of nowhere, done what he was meant to do, and settled in like he'd always belonged. One evening, the sheriff paid Jack a quiet visit. "Some folks think that dog came from somewhere else," he said, sipping coffee. Like he was sent. Jack didn't answer. He just looked over at Shadow, who was lying by the fire, watching him with those knowing eyes. All Jack knew was this. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was a turning point. A silent guardian with a purpose far greater than anyone could explain. And Jack wasn't going to let him go. Not now. Not ever. If this story moved you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And turn on that notification bell. Don't miss what we've got coming next.